Hi everyone and welcome to another video. I'm lauranemacquart and today I'm going to talk about what I did for the Invisible Cities project for Mozambique and Lebanon. Now, we are now nearly at the end of July and Mozambique and Lebanon were two countries that were actually picked in June, but I'm a little bit behind with filming my updates on these, and also I think that I actually just finished the Mozambican book and made the food at the beginning of July, so I'm kind of a little bit behind on my planning and such, but we'll get there. I'm gonna start with Lebanon. So for Lebanon I read this book by Amin Maalouf, which in French is called Léon l'Africain, and in English would then be translated to Leon the African. Leon the African is, well, no, first off, this book is not actually set in Lebanon, but I was doing my research and discovered that Amin Maalouf is a Lebanese author, and I was looking at books and stuff, and I realized, wait, I know that name, I have that book. I think this is one of the first times that I actually had a book on my TBR that was also from a country that we were going to read. So despite this not being set in Lebanon, but being set mostly in Morocco and the general Mediterranean area, because Amin Maalouf is a well-known Lebanese author, because it's in French, because I had the book, I decided I would count it, at least for the Invisible Cities project. I'm also doing my Reading Around the World project, and while they overlap, I think that I'm not going to count this as my Lebanese pick for Reading Around the World, and I will visit that country again, or, well, not again, I will visit that country full stop at a later stage when I go to Lebanon for that project. Anyway, so this is a fictional autobiography. Léon l'Africain is a person that actually existed in the 16th century. He's not actually called Léon l'Africain. His real name is Hassan al-Wazan, and as I said, he's born in Morocco, well, no, in Grenada, but lived partially in Morocco, and he visited the north of Africa during his life, and he also wrote a book about that called something Africa, and for a long period of time that book was used for people to get to know Africa, and the things that this person Léon l'Africain wrote about in that book were the basis for a lot of people for their knowledge on Africa, and also the inherent racism in this, because Léon l'Africain, as a lot of people in that period in time and still today, associate white skin with superiority and black skin with inferiority. The reason he's called in this book Léon l'Africain, and also in general is known as Léon l'Africain and not Hassan al-Wazan, is because when he was 30 or 40, he was kidnapped by some Roman slaveholders, and they brought him to Rome, and he was put in some kind of castle for a year, and he was converted to Christianity. And we don't really know whether he was okay with that, whether he was also converted in his heart, or that it was just an overall conversion. But his mentor was Pope Leo X, I believe, and so Leo X gave his name to Hassan al-Wazan. Anyway, this book, what is it about? It is basically about Hassan al-Wazan's life. He was born in Grenada at a time where the Portuguese would take over Grenada just when he's still a young boy, and his family, like a lot of other Muslim people, are faced with the choice, well, either you stay but then you have to convert to Christianity, or you go away. And they kind of get a period of 3 years to make that decision, and they end up going to Fez, like a lot of other people. And it was interesting to see different standpoints on this question and how people were looking at the Portuguese at this point in time. So we see his youth in Fez. He talks a little bit about his father, about his mother, about their relationship. And when he's a young boy, his uncle, who is the ambassador of the Sultan of Fez, is sent to another country. I can't remember which one. But Hassan is allowed to go with his uncle on that trip, and that is the first of his trips. So he goes through a country called Nubia, where he is offered a slave girl. And the thing is that in this book, because the names are used of North Africa in general, the countries, the cities also at that time. There were a lot of places that couldn't really place, and I have to admit I didn't do research when I found a country or a place. I was like, oh well, let's find out what this is now. So I was happy when they talked about Algiers, which I know, oh I know that one. And he also goes to Egypt. There he stays in Cairo for a while. And he's also there at a time that there is a pest and a lot of people have to leave, but he then stays into the city. It's a very descriptive book because there's a lot of traveling and because it's a lot about him going places and seeing things. There's not a lot. It's written in a very descriptive way, and despite there are things that happen, though not that much, it doesn't feel, at least for me, it didn't feel like a narrative. And I don't really like this kind of very long descriptions that you don't really, it doesn't feel like it's going somewhere. Also, I didn't really like his voice. Because I think, because he's an actual person, Amin Maalouf decided to not give him too much of a voice, not let him have opinion on things. So for example, when he's a kid and his family decides to leave Grenada and goes to Fez, you would imagine he would feel something. He would feel sorry to leave Grenada, he would be happy to see Fez, he would, I don't know, and he doesn't have an opinion. Same goes when his father does some stuff, he doesn't, there is no point at which he said, but I still love my father, or I didn't like what he did, or you weren't even shown what his emotions were. There was no anger, there was no feeling, and because of that, this person didn't have any depth to me. And the points where he did have an opinion was then a point that I really wasn't interested in his opinion, and I thought his opinion was very surface level, and that was about women. I think he has about 4 women that he either marries or has a very deep connection with. One is the slave girl that he's given, and after 10 years of loving her, he finally sets her free. And the only thing he says about her basically is, oh, she's so beautiful, oh, she's so beautiful, I loved her, she's so beautiful. There's his first wife who, well, poor him, he had to marry her because she was the daughter of his uncle, and he really only did it for his uncle, but otherwise, oh, what an ugly girl. And his 2 next wives, or concubines, or whatever, is also only so beautiful, blah blah blah. There's no depth to them. He also has kids with these people, and even through his travels, there's no moment in which he says, oh, I miss my kid, or I'm curious how my kid is doing, or oh, I left my kid in a war zone, I wonder how my kid is doing. That just feels weird. So it was a struggle to get through this. It's a very short book. At the same time, I was reading another French book that has this format, so this height, that is, I think, 2, maybe 3 times bigger. And it took me so much longer to read this. It was just so slow going. I wasn't interested in the characters. But I'm happy that I read it because Léon Africain is a historical figure. I'm not sure Amin Maalouf's writing is for me. So I'm not sure whether, if I decide to visit Lebanon reading-wise, I will read again something by him. But if you like descriptive things that go through an area in the past, then you will like this. Because I think that the research that Amin Maalouf did to write this is very well done. Anyway, the food was a success. Let's focus on the food. I decided to make falafels. I had tried making falafels once before, and that had failed miserably. But now that meant that I had learned of my mistakes, and I used chickpeas that are in a pot already, and because they are wet, the first time they had kind of fallen apart. This was already months ago, before Invisible Cities was in my life. But now I added some, what's it called? De la farine. Dough? No. The white stuff, the white powder, not cocaine, the other white powder, not. Anyway, the white stuff. And that made them, they didn't fall apart. So they were very good. I followed the recipes, and actually when the day before cooking, when we were at the shop, I found that they had new spices, also spices that are already organized. Oh, if you're making falafels, you need these spices. So that came in handy, and I ate the falafels in a Lebanese bread. And yes, I have to admit, I bought the bread. I could have made it, I should have made it, I feel like I should have made it. I feel a little bit bad for not making it, But I was at the shop and they had a thing saying Lebanese bread. And of course the bread wasn't great, but I felt like having the actual thing instead of making something that is not really it. Now at least I had the cardboard supermarket other country version of the actual thing, which somehow it felt easy at the time. And what else was there in the bread? I think I just added some tomatoes and also made tzatziki. I wasn't sure whether tzatziki was part of the Lebanese experience, but the recipe called for it and I decided to follow the recipe. So it was really good. I'm definitely gonna make falafels more often. Yeah, they're nice. Now, Mozambique. Again, another book that I didn't really like. I started reading a short story collection by Mia Couto called Sea Loves Me, and the short stories were very short. They were just a couple of pages, and I really liked the tone. I really liked the magical realism feel of it. I liked also the sense of place, but they were so short, and right now I'm feeling a little bit hectic in my life, and I really felt that I needed a novel that was longer. I needed something that I could attach my brain to and just be taken along for a longer ride instead of always having to switch. So after a couple of short stories I decided that I was going to switch books but stay with the same author, and I read on my e-reader via Scribd Woman in Ashes. Let me check if that is the right name. It's called Women of the Ashes. Me having to look up the title should already start to say something. So this book is set a couple of decades ago. It starts in 1894 in the south of Mozambique at a time where Portugal was still in charge. I hadn't realized yet that Portugal was the colonial power of both Granada, which is where Hassan al-Wassan was for, and also in this book, so that's a nice link. Anyway, we follow two people, two distinct voices. On the one hand we have a young girl that is from Mozambique and who is from a family, I think she's called Imani. She's from a family of pro-Portuguese people, so when she's young her and her brothers are... Yes, there's a car that wants our attention. Not mine, probably. Yeah, her parents are pro-Portuguese, so they send her and her brothers when they're young to learn Portuguese, and they are the few people in the village that wear Western clothes and wear shoes, etc. And because of that they have a link with the local Portuguese power. So when a man is sent over to look after them, because they can't look after themselves obviously, they are the translators, they are the ones that bring him food, they are the ones that do the shopping, they are the ones that guard him. And he is the second voice. He's a sergeant who is sent to Mozambique to look after these people because he's done something bad in Portugal. And he sends letter to his general, and that is how we get his voice. Now in this area there is also another power that wants to take over the village, and there's discussion because the local villagers expect that Portugal will protect them, while Portugal thinks, small village, don't really care. So in this village the people that expect they will get protections, and the ones that kind of want to also fight the Portuguese with this other group. And that is basically a little bit the premise of the book. I didn't feel like there was a lot happening. The reason that I liked it is because you get a sense of space. I liked the voice of Imani. She has a little bit of a magical realism feel to her. She talks about her dreams, she talks about sometimes going in the river and how she views the relationships between the people around her. That was kind of interesting. The voice of the Portuguese sergeant was a little bit less. It was interesting because the inherent racism and how he views the locals was completely in your face. It was so much so in your face that it didn't feel very authentic. There was just... I expect that racism to be very harsh and very clear, but I also expect there to be some nuances, or there to be also details in which you see how big these prejudices are, and I missed that second part of it. It's just him saying, oh well, the black people are inferior, we all know it. But I wanted to see a little bit more in how he treats people. So because of that it felt a little bit flat. all of the characters basically didn't feel very deep, except for Imani's grandfather. His story was one that I did believe. Unfortunately, we see him for a very short time. So this book is, I believe, the first of a trilogy, because on the one hand, well, there is this relationship that kind of builds up between Imani and the sergeant, and that is something that you will probably see in the next books. I can't say I liked it. I have to say it felt a little bit too flat for me. There was nothing that was interesting in what was going to happen, or I would definitely read about the grandfather, but Imani and the sergeant, just a little bit less. And I also didn't get enough of... There's an interesting story in that Imani has two brothers. One is pro-Portuguese, we will say, and the other isn't. And that tension would have also been very interesting, but the only thing that happens is that they kind of ignore the anti-Portuguese brother. And imagine this relationship seen from the point of view of the mother and her having a broken heart. That would have brought a lot more depth, a lot more tension to the book. I think that's what I missed. Tension. Some force, something that you want to be resolved. So yeah. Wasn't great. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. As for food, I made a curry. Also because I was a little bit lazy at that point in time, and the not challenging myself too much on the food front has been nice. It has been good not to make stuff that I feel like, oh no, what is this? But the disadvantage is that a curry, I find it difficult to make sure that it has authentic flavor somehow. I don't really taste a difference in the curry when I make a curry that is from a Mozambican recipe versus what are the other curries I made from, for example, from Madagascar. Now I know there are both, what is that, East African countries, but still there wasn't, I can't tell you. I'm definitely going to forget that I made a curry for that. It was a curry with some haricots verts, I believe, some broccoli. Yeah, I can't really remember. I'll insert a clip here, but it wasn't very special. It was nice, there was nothing wrong with it, but nothing very special. So, because of the book being a little bit meh, because of the food being not very special, I can't say I have a feeling for Mozambique yet. As far as you can have a feeling for a country after having read one book. I think the main thing that I will still know in 1 year is that Mozambique used to be a Portuguese colony. I think that will be about it. I miss a little bit more. Maybe I should see if I can find a documentary or something to get a little bit more of the history, of the sense of place, etc. Anyway, that is what I did for both Mozambique and Lebanon for the Invisible Cities project. For both countries, I feel like I will have to go back, which is very unfortunate, both for very different reasons. But for both, I'm looking forward to. If you have any recommendations, book, food, documentaries, movies, I'm not really into podcasts, for either of these two countries, please let me know. I'll see you in another video. Thank you for watching. Bye.
Ba-chum, ba-chum, chum.